So, meals with Jesus. We've been thinking in our songs actually about the majesty of God and the intimacy of that place with him, and we're going to see that in this meal that we're going to share with Jesus now, both the majesty and the intimacy. And when we looked at meals last week, we saw they weren't always comfortable affairs, and in a sense, this isn't a comfortable meal either. The meal today is only told by John. The other three Gospels talk about the meal. John talks about this event that happened at the meal, and the meal, in a sense, is just they were eating. The meal isn't important to John, the event is. And I guess he thought perhaps because the Gospels had all been written, Matthew, Mark and Luke, before he was writing, I guess he thought that was probably enough. The detail was out there. He wanted to bring something different. And so some people see this event as John's Eucharist. I don't know why the other Gospels omitted it. Don't know why John includes it. We could ponder that, but we're not going to do that today. If you want to go away and ponder it, you can do that. I'm going to read from John 13, verses 1 to 12. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress. The other Gospels all referred to it as the Last Supper. That's the meal that's in progress. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "no, you'll never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said, not everyone was clean. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Foot washing in the time of Jesus was an important part of the hospitality. It was a significant part of the hospitality. You arrive at your own house or someone else's house, and your feet are filthy, absolutely filthy. If you imagine living in a hot and dusty land, wearing leather sandals, walking along paths that are hot and dusty, which have been frequented by oxen and donkeys and camels and goats and sheep, all leaving their mark, let's just say. And feet were dirty and dusty and dry. And so the washing of the feet would not have been a pleasant task. Thinking about sandals that were all caught up with the dirt of the day, washing the feet was the job of the slave who was the lowest in the household. It was an unpleasant task, and so it was done by the least important person in the house. In fact, the offer to wash feet was so common in the day of Jesus that there was a phrase, with unwashed feet. And so if somebody said of a person, they went to bed with unwashed feet, it immediately told you something of their personal standards of hygiene, and not only that, the standards of the hygiene of the house that they were in. It was almost like a condemnation. She went to bed with unwashed feet. Terrible, terrible. The offer was traditionally made by the host on arrival at the house. Only the very rich could afford baths in their houses, and the people of the day would have gone out to the public baths now and again, probably, to have a bath. But washing feet was done often, frequently, because of the necessary need to do so. And I was reading that it was in this time, the rabbis of the day were having discussion because they were finding that their disciples, in an effort to prove how highly they revered their rabbis, were trying to do the very humblest of jobs for their rabbis in order to prove their service, if you like. And some of the disciples were overzealous in their acts of service. And the rabbis had made an edict that every task that the slave does for his master will the disciple do for his rabbi, his teacher, except one. Except one. And that one was, he shall not loosen the thong of his sandal. And that, of course, is a statement that we know John the Baptist made, didn't he? About the coming of Jesus. He would not loosen the thong, he wasn't worthy to loosen the thong of his sandal, let alone wash his feet. It's a demonstration of the greatest humility. Imagine then that you're sitting around the table and he gets up. He takes off his outer clothing, wraps a towel around his waist, and fetches a bowl. I wonder what was going through the minds of the disciples. He's not, is he? No, surely not. No. Oh, he is. He is. He jolly well is. You can almost kind of feel the amazement, the horror. And then maybe that changed to, so is he going to do everyone? Is he going to do me? What if he doesn't do me? What if he doesn't? What if I get missed out? Will it change our relationship? Is he going to expect me to do this to others? You can imagine the thoughts racing through their heads. And we see some of this dilemma in Peter's words. And isn't it interesting? All of the disciples were there. All of the disciples had their feet washed, including Judas. But we only get Peter's response. And he says, are you going to wash my feet? I wonder how he asked that. Are you going to wash my feet? I wonder how he asked it. And then when Jesus indicates that he is, he says, no, never. I mean, that is a statement of fact, but it's also the never strengthens the no. It is a complete, absolute no. Just no, never, unthinkable. And Jesus answered, we don't see it quite well in the NIV, but Jesus answers with an equally double emphatic. If you don't, you have no part of me. So he mirrors John's no, never by saying, if you don't, you have no part of me. And typically Peter, he's in a quandary now, and he throws aside all his principles. It's unthinkable to be excluded from to not be part of what Jesus is doing. And he goes completely the other way. And maybe he even starts to kind of strip off, seemingly not caring to be naked in front of the other disciples. Well, then wash all of me. Wash all of me. And Jesus stops him and says, no, that's not necessary. And we could look in detail about what Jesus might mean about if you're already clean, if you've bathed, you don't need you only need to wash your feet. And I think that's something to do with salvation. I think that's something to do with believing in God and putting faith in him, and you've done that. So all you need to do is wash your feet. You don't need to do that again. But I want us to remain in that moment of Jesus washing Peter's feet. The Lord, the light of the world, the Creator God, in all his majesty, is kneeling at his disciples' feet. It's the wrong way round, isn't it? It's the wrong way round. And he takes off Peter's sandals. He perhaps moves his robe aside and takes his feet. I've been a nurse for many years. I have washed a lot of feet in my years as a nurse. And I'm not likening what I did to what Jesus did. I'm not trying to do that at all. What I think about when I think about the number of feet that I've washed is my preferred way of doing it. I preferred the person to be sitting in the chair, because if they were sitting in the chair, you could put a bowl of water on the floor and then they could put their feet in the bowl. Just imagine putting your feet in a bowl of lovely, warm water, and how soothing that is, particularly if you're poorly. Just sitting there with your feet in that lovely, warm water. And then to take a sponge and some soap, and you need a confident touch, because if you're too light and tentative, it becomes tickly, and that's no good. It's got to be firm, confident, and to soap the foot. Rinse it. And then I would kneel on the floor. I would be kneeling on the floor. This was my preferred way of doing it. Towel on my lap, take the foot out, rest it in my lap. So they're not trying to hold their foot up, legs shaking. Take the weight, and then you can dry it. And you know what I found over and over and over and over was that was an intimate space. You, them, in this personal act of washing feet. Curtains drawn, and they talked. They told you things they had not told other people hardly ever before, because that personal service kind of created that intimate space. Now take the image of Jesus washing your feet. Your foot in his lap, the towel, just you and him. What might he say to you? What might you say to him? Yes, there's a room full of people around that table at the Last Supper. And yet somehow the intimate space is created for each one. I think it's just an amazing Amazing scene. And in fact, I'll give them to you as you leave. I've got a reflection that I found when I was looking at this yesterday. And it kind of takes us through that reaction of Peter. But it's in the first person. As I lean on your shoulder, I glance down and I see your feet. So if you want to take it away and sit with it, I would encourage you to do that. Sit with it in your own quietness and put yourself in that place. And there's a picture with it. Sieger Koder is a German priest, and he has a particular style of art. And the more you look in the picture, the more you see. And what I love about this picture is that we see Jesus' feet. And if you look at Jesus, you can't see his face. He's got his face almost buried in Peter's lap. Peter is holding on to Jesus' back. He's also going, no. How do we do that? What is the no we're saying no to? And then if you look in the bowl, you can see the reflection of Jesus' face along with Peter's feet. So you can take that away with you at the end and reflect on it if you would like to. Cardinal Hume, the late Cardinal Hume, referred to the washing of feet as divine courtesy. Isn't that a lovely phrase? Divine courtesy. The courtesy, the regard, the love that God has for each of us. And he says, can we match that courtesy in return? And Pope Benedict, in his writing about the washing of feet, says it illustrates the way that Jesus washes our feet all through our lives. He doesn't want to trample on us. He kneels down before us and exalts us. God's kingdom's so topsy-turvy, isn't it? The mystery of the greatness of God is seen precisely, Pope Benedict says, in the fact that he can be small. Jesus' whole self is there in that humble action of foot washing. Our servant King.